The Catskill Mountains, a symphony of nature's splendor. Rolling hills adorned with vibrant foliage stretched towards the horizon. Crystal-clear streams meandered through dense forests, their waters reflecting the azure sky. To the casual observer, it was a sanctuary of peace, a tranquil escape from the cacophony of city life. But beneath this serene facade lay an unsettling truth. The mountains held secrets, dark, ancient secrets whispered on the wind. The Catskills were known for their unpredictable nature. Storms could whip up in an instant, shrouding the familiar trails in an impenetrable fog. It was a place where reality blurred with folklore, where the line between myth and truth became dangerously thin. Locals spoke of strange occurrences, unexplained lights in the night, whispers carried on the wind. But these were just stories meant to scare tourists around a campfire, or so everyone thought. Emily, Daniel, Chris, Jessica and Ashley, 5 friends, inseparable since childhood. They craved adventure, a break from the monotony of their everyday lives. The Catskills, with their promise of breathtaking hikes and secluded campsites, seemed like the perfect getaway. They packed their bags, their excitement palpable. This trip was long overdue, a chance to reconnect with nature and with each other. The drive was filled with laughter and anticipation. They shared stories, joked, and sang along to their favorite songs. The weight of their everyday lives seemed to lift with every passing mile. Upon reaching the foot of the mountains, they parked their car and shouldered their backpacks. The air, crisp and cool, was invigorating. They set off into the woods, their boots crunching on the fallen leaves, their spirits high. The promise of adventure hung in the air, as tangible as the scent of pine needles and damp earth. As they ventured deeper into the woods, the light began to fade. The trees, towering giants with gnarled branches, cast long, eerie shadows. It was then that they stumbled upon an old, weathered signpost. The paint was peeling, and the lettering was barely visible. But one word stood out, stark and ominous: beware. Daniel chuckled nervously. Looks like we're in for a spooky weekend. His attempt at humor did little to ease the growing tension. The others, though trying to maintain a brave face, couldn't shake off a feeling of unease. Local legends, dismissed as mere folklore until now, began to resurface in their minds. Stories of lost hikers who were never seen again. Whispers of a malevolent entity that haunted the mountains. They tried to ignore these thoughts, but the oppressive silence of the woods seemed to amplify every rustle of leaves, every snapping twig, into something sinister. They set up camp as dusk settled, a blanket of darkness slowly enveloping the forest. The once comforting sounds of nature, the chirping of crickets, the rustling leaves, now seemed amplified, distorted, an unsettling symphony. After a meal cooked over a crackling fire, they huddled closer, sharing stories and laughter, trying to ignore the growing unease. Emily, always the restless one, decided to take a short walk. "I need to stretch my legs," she announced, her voice unusually loud in the stillness of the woods. "I won't be long." Her friends, lost in their conversation, barely acknowledged her departure. It was only when the fire began to die down, casting long, dancing shadows, that they realized Emily had been gone an unnaturally long time. "Emily?" Chris called out, his voice tight with sudden fear. There was no answer, only the echo of his voice, swallowed by the immense silence of the mountains. Panic began to set in. They searched frantically, calling Emily's name until their voices were hoarse. The forest, once a place of tranquility, now felt menacing, each shadow seeming to conceal something sinister. Their calls were met with an eerie silence, broken only by the rustling of leaves and the distant hoot of an owl. As the hours passed, their hope dwindled. The forest seemed to close in around them, a labyrinth with no escape. The darkness was almost tangible now, pressing down on them, suffocating them with fear. They stumbled upon Emily's flashlight, lying abandoned on the forest floor. The beam was still active, casting a stark white circle in the darkness, but there was no sign of their friend. Exhausted and terrified, they stumbled back to their campsite. The once welcoming clearing now felt cold, alien. As they huddled together for what little comfort they could find, a movement at the edge of the trees caught Chris's eye. A tall, shadowy figure, its outline barely discernible against the darkness, stood motionless, watching them. "Who's there?" Chris called out, his voice trembling. The figure didn't respond. It just stood there, its silence more terrifying than any sound. Then, as quickly as it had appeared, it was gone. Had they imagined it? A figment of their fear-addled minds? Or was there something truly malevolent lurking in the darkness, toying with them? They found their campsite in disarray. Tents were ripped apart, supplies scattered everywhere. It was as if a wild animal had rampaged through, but there were no tracks, no signs of any creature. An unsettling silence hung in the air, broken only by their ragged breaths. And then they saw them. Photographs, hanging from the trees, swaying gently in the breeze. Photographs of themselves, their faces contorted in expressions of pure terror. Where had these photos come from? None of them remembered taking such disturbing pictures. A wave of nausea swept over them, the stench of fear thick in the air. The photographs were more than unsettling, they were deeply disturbing. Each image depicted their faces twisted in expressions of sheer terror, their eyes wide with unimaginable fear. It was as if they were staring into the abyss of their own demise. The once comforting images of their friendship now mocked them, a cruel reminder of their vulnerability in this desolate wilderness. The silence was shattered by Jessica's scream. She pointed a trembling finger at the base of a nearby tree. There, pinned to the bark with a rusty nail, was another photograph. This one was different. This one was of Emily, and her face was frozen in a silent scream. Panic surged through them, raw and consuming. They had to escape, to run, to get away from this nightmare. But the woods, once familiar, now seemed to shift and twist around them, the paths disappearing into the undergrowth. They were lost, trapped in a macabre game they didn't understand. They ran blindly, their breaths ragged, their hearts pounding against their ribs. The sound of their pursuer was relentless, the snapping of twigs, the rustling of leaves, always close behind, a constant reminder of their impending doom. One by one they were picked off, their screams swallowed by the unforgiving darkness. Only Daniel, fueled by adrenaline and terror, managed to break free, stumbling out of the woods and onto a deserted road. He never looked back. The official search party found no trace of Emily, Chris, Jessica or Ashley. Daniel's incoherent ramblings about shadowy figures and haunting photographs were dismissed as the delusions of a traumatized young man. The case, officially unsolved, was eventually closed. But the whispers remain. Whispers of a malevolent entity that lurks in the shadows of the Catskills, preying on the unsuspecting. Some dismiss it as folklore, a cautionary tale to keep hikers from straying too far from the beaten path. But others, those who have felt the chill of an unseen presence in the stillness of the woods, know better. They know that the mountains hold secrets, dark and ancient. And some secrets, they believe, are best left undisturbed.